Elizabeth Montgomery's life offers a striking case study of how a seemingly light-hearted television persona can obscure far more complex realities. She became a household name as Samantha Stevens on the beloved 1960s sitcom Bewitched, twinkling her nose, conjuring comedic spells, and sustaining one of TV's most memorable illusions, the ideal suburban housewife who just happened to be a witch. Yet the real story behind that magic, behind that comedic sparkle, was one of parental friction, painful marriages, intense personal ambition, social activism, hidden heartbreak, rebellious gestures, behind-the-scenes tensions, and eventually a brave political voice. By the time she passed away from cancer in 1995, Elizabeth Montgomery had woven a life of dazzling success, yet punctuated by regrets, illusions, and iron-willed resolve. When in her final years, she began revealing the truth about Bewitched and her personal battles, it caused viewers to revisit the show not merely as a whimsical comedic relic, but as a subversive statement underscored by her own complicated journey. She was born in Los Angeles, a city already bursting with Hollywood energies, on April 15, 1933. Some references might say 1934, but 1933 is usually accepted. Her father, the acclaimed actor Robert Montgomery, was an Academy Award nominee whose polished patrician style made him a mainstay of 1930s and 1940s films. Her mother, Elizabeth Daniel Bryan Allen, had been a Broadway actress. That formidable lineage could have opened doors for a young performer, but Robert Montgomery, as protective as he was proud, did not wish his daughter to hurl herself into Hollywood's precarious vortex. She studied drama, nonetheless, training at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in Manhattan, or a comparable institution. Accounts vary, but all point to a classical acting foundation. Her father eventually allowed her to debut on his television anthology series, Robert Montgomery Presents, albeit reluctantly. That father-daughter tension became a crucial undercurrent in her life. She grew up in a swirl of paternal disapproval and maternal sympathy, forging a contradictory sense of independence and longing for acceptance that would shape her choice of husbands and lovers. From the start, she found herself drawn to older men who consciously or unconsciously seemed like paternal stand-ins. Her earliest marriage was to New York socialite Frederick Gallatin Kaman in 1954, a man older by about a decade, someone well-placed in high society. For a starry-eyed actress in her early 20s, this might have promised security, but it clashed with her creative ambitions. After about a year, the marriage dissolved. Meanwhile, she had accepted roles in television and film, culminating in her first Hollywood feature opposite Gary Cooper. The rumor mill suggested she and Cooper embarked on a fling. Cooper, widely revered and considerably older, fit the paternal pattern, but also represented everything her father disliked about the industry. Glamorous, unbound by conventional morality, easily enthralled by on-set romances. Elizabeth's father, while never publicly acknowledging these details, was presumably aghast. For her part, Elizabeth discovered that a short fling with a Hollywood titan was not enough to stifle her yearning for real breakthroughs. She pressed onward. By the mid-1950s, Elizabeth Montgomery found herself appearing in a variety of minor film and television roles, fleeting but necessary stepping stones for a young actress who had broken from her father's shadow. She made brief appearances in live TV dramas and small cinematic parts, learning the ins and outs of on-set etiquette while trying to shake off the notion that she was Robert Montgomery's daughter rather than an independent talent. It was a difficult dynamic. Producers were drawn to her name, but often expected a carbon copy of her father's sophisticated persona, which she wasn't interested in delivering. Instead, she aimed to showcase a freer, more earthy acting style that wouldn't merely mimic the polished patrician aura Robert Montgomery personified. Yet genuine breakthroughs were elusive, especially with her father's backstage reservations haunting her. On one hand, he pulled strings for cameo bookings, but on the other, he undermined her by letting producers know he considered acting a precarious choice for his beloved but headstrong daughter. In the midst of these early struggles, Elizabeth drew attention from men whose statuses, ironically, paralleled her father's. This pattern played out again in 1956 when she married Gig Young, born Byron Barr, who was an established star in his own right, older than she was, witty, and increasingly recognized for comedic and dramatic range, having gained traction in films like Teacher's Pet, 1958, and eventually winning a Best Supporting Actor Oscar for They Shoot Horses, Don't They? In 1970, Young brought both prestige and a swirling undercurrent of Elizabeth, newly freed from her short union to Frederick Cameron, found Young's magnetic screen presence appealing. To some close observers, this dynamic seemed to echo her father's paternal aura, charismatic, older, formidable. Yet it came with the inescapable baggage of Gig Young's volatile emotional state. Their union quickly devolved into a precarious dance between comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak. In public, the couple projected a glamorous synergy at Hollywood galas, smiling for photographers, hosting dinner parties that capitalized on Young's comedic flair and Montgomery's emerging star persona. But behind closed doors, their relationship frayed under Young's heavy drinking and unpredictable moods. Elizabeth, outwardly a bright and determined actress, found herself forced to manage or excuse her husband's occasional rages or extended binges, overshadowing the illusions they performed for the world. Tensions escalated. Elizabeth longed for an upward career trajectory. Young, confronted by career stagnation, clung to her rising star. Family members recall episodes in which Elizabeth left the house in tears, only to return after pleas from Young or conciliatory gestures. That cycle ground on until it became untenable. Sometime in 1962, the illusions overshadow heartbreak cracked for good, and by 1963 they officially divorced. Though the official reason was irreconcilable differences, those close to the situation whispered about yelling matches, triggered by Young's binges, as well as Elizabeth's quiet fury that her father still questioned her judgment in picking older men with troubled backgrounds. Within a startlingly short window after the split, Elizabeth leaped into another marriage, this time with director-producer William Asher. As had happened before, on the set of 1963's Johnny Cool, Elizabeth grew close to the man at the helm. But William Asher, unlike Gig Young, was not primarily an actor. He was recognized for directing comedic series such as Our Miss Brooks, and later the early Beach Party films, starring Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello. He was, yet again, more than a decade older than Elizabeth, quietly replicating the paternal dynamic she appeared to gravitate toward. However, Asher had a skill set uniquely suited to Elizabeth's comedic instincts. If her father had drawn her into show business half-heartedly, Asher embraced her comedic potential with full enthusiasm. He recognized the comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak in her earnest desire for a star-making vehicle. They spent many late nights pitching concepts back and forth. Some rumors suggest they considered a comedic detective series or a breezy family sitcom before stumbling upon an idea that lit them both up, a modern-day witch living a double life as a suburban housewife. It's uncertain precisely how the Bewitched premise first took shape. Some anecdotal accounts mention Asher referencing an old French film or a Colgate Comedy Hour gag about witches. Others say Elizabeth pitched a story about a magical but lonely housewife. What is widely agreed upon is that the comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak in that concept, a show that could marry the typical American dream facade of tidy neighborhoods and vanilla domestic conflicts with a subversive undercurrent about a woman who wields real power. Power she's forced to conceal from mortals who might ostracize her if they learned the truth. This would be comedic and family-friendly on the surface, yet loaded with allegories for repressed identities. The project quickly attracted interest from William Dozier and the higher-ups at Screen Gems, an affiliate of Columbia Pictures Television, with ABC ready to jump on a comedic fantasy that might rival The Munsters or The Addams Family, also under development around that time. Once contracts were hammered out, filming commenced. Almost immediately, comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak behind the scenes when Elizabeth learned she was pregnant. The producers panicked at the notion that their lead actress, meant to be a lithe, enchanting witch, would be sporting a noticeable baby bump. Asher orchestrated hectic filming schedules, shooting scenes that didn't include Elizabeth first, then staging close-ups or costume camouflage once she was present. Far from dooming the show, these improvised solutions worked, and Bewitched premiered in September 1964, promptly capturing massive ratings. Critics praised Elizabeth's comedic approach, praising her sparkling presence and the unique comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak of Samantha trying to juggle everyday housekeeping with secret magic. Audiences were equally captivated by the clash between Samantha's powers and Darren's terror at being discovered by neighbors or Darren's boss, Larry Tate. The show soared into top 10 territory. Elizabeth received multiple Emmy nods in subsequent years. Meanwhile, though, illusions overshadow heartbreak in real life. Early into the run, Elizabeth carried another pregnancy, again requiring behind-the-scenes acrobatics from costumers. The paternal dynamic with Asher repeated a pattern of her conceding final decisions on comedic pacing or scripts. Tensions eventually grew as Asher's controlling side surfaced, reminiscent of her father's overshadowing presence. By the mid to late 1960s, her comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak again when they had serious arguments about how Samantha should be portrayed. In Asher's vision, Samantha had to be an uncomplicated, lovingly subservient wife. Elizabeth, however, was quietly linking Samantha's predicament, hiding a fundamental trait from society, to the real plight of marginalized groups. She wanted Sam to have more overt agency, to slip in progressive elements, possibly about women's independence or acceptance of outsiders. They compromised superficially, but friction lingered. That show was Bewitched, greenlit by ABC. The comedic illusions of Samantha, a modern housewife concealing her powers from an unsuspecting mortal husband, appealed to a broad audience. Filming began, only to be complicated by Elizabeth's pregnancy. This became the first of multiple times that the show needed to adapt around her real-life pregnancies. Instead of discarding her, the producers recognized her comedic sparkle was central. They shot around her baby bump, used prop furniture to block the camera view, or rearranged schedules, sometimes halting production to let her deliver her child and recuperate. Once Bewitched finally premiered in 1964, it skyrocketed to the top of Nielsen ratings, enthralling viewers with the comedic illusions of Samantha's nose twitches and comedic hijinks. Asher directed numerous episodes while Elizabeth starred, forming a professional synergy that often overshadowed the inevitable personal tensions. Indeed, illusions overshadow heartbreak behind the scenes, as the couple's dynamic was rarely smooth. Asher sometimes displayed controlling traits. Elizabeth occasionally felt stifled, and both wrestled with the exhaustion of raising children while churning out an ongoing series. Dick York came on as the show's original Darren Stevens, Samantha's mortal husband. York, afflicted by severe back pain from an earlier injury, battled addiction to medication and, as rumor had it, took to drinking on set to cope with the unrelenting pain. Elizabeth tried to maintain a friendly stance, but York's professional reliability soon eroded. In a weird twist, York developed a personal fixation on Elizabeth, telling her he had fallen in love. She was not flattered. Surrounded by comedic illusions, the show had to keep filming even if York occasionally collapsed from pain or drunkenness. The final straw arrived when York literally could not continue filming. He collapsed on set, was rushed to medical care, and the producers swiftly replaced him with Dick Sargent. Elizabeth recognized the practical necessity. As star and co-producer, by way of her marriage to Asher, she couldn't let personal sympathy overshadow the comedic illusions fueling Bewitched. Thus ended York's involvement. The illusions overshadow heartbreak in other ways. The comedic synergy fans saw between Samantha and Darren belied real friction between Sargent, who replaced York, and other cast members. Sargent, a closeted gay man, found acceptance in Elizabeth, who quietly championed him, but also recognized that society wasn't ready for an openly gay leading man. The comedic illusions overshadow reality again, as the script refused to highlight anything but the comedic domestic scenes. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's personal life was unraveling. She engaged in an extramarital affair with guest director Richard Michaels during the latter part of Bewitched. Crew members noticed the chemistry, the private jokes, the hush-hush lunches that turned into suspiciously long absences. Once discovered, the affair imploded, destroying Michaels' own marriage and fueling vicious fights between Elizabeth and Asher. The illusions overshadow heartbreak once more. Behind the comedic pastel living room sets was a meltdown about marital betrayal. By season 8, the actress was thoroughly exhausted by the comedic illusions overshadowing her real artistic aspirations. She no longer wanted to be Samantha, the nose-twitching housewife. She threatened to walk. The show's producers tried raising her salary, typical for TV negotiations, but money alone couldn't quell her restlessness. She insisted she had done all she could with Samantha. The illusions overshadow heartbreak for the last time. Filming concluded in 1972, and Bewitched ended with a whimper, overshadowed by a wave of cast changes and personal fiascos. Elizabeth had already divorced Asher by then. She pivoted to a series of bold TV movies and features, starting with A Case of Rape in 1974, tackling the taboo subject of sexual assault with an unflinching lens. The special aired to record audiences who saw, maybe for the first time, that Samantha Stevens could do gritty drama. Critics praised her. She followed with The Legend of Lizzie Borden, 1975, in which she portrayed the infamous alleged murderer, again shocking fans who only knew her comedic illusions. In 1977, she starred in A Killing Affair, an interracial romance with O.J. Simpson that raised eyebrows, not just for the racial dimension, which was still considered provocative in network TV, but also in hindsight, because O.J. would stand accused of murder in 1994. Another chilling parallel. She had starred in The Legend of Lizzie Borden, speculating on a possible murderer, and now she was acting alongside a man who, decades later, would be at the center of one of the century's most publicized homicide trials. Over the years, fans and writers occasionally note this coincidence, overshadowing comedic illusions with an eerie sense that reality had ironically mirrored her on-screen roles. Alongside these roles, she discovered a fervor for activism. She was outraged by the Vietnam War, unafraid to voice that stance in interviews. A risk in a country that was, especially in the mid to late 1960s, still deeply divided about war. She also championed women's rights in an era when feminism was sometimes demonized. Though Bewitched might have been seen as comedic domestic fluff, Elizabeth tried pushing subtle messages of empowerment. She even refused to wear a bra on set, thereby aligning with the bra-burning protests that symbolized second-wave feminism. That stance also made comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak. The costumers or producers might quietly scramble to ensure illusions of a perky 1960s housewife remained, but in truth, the actress was staging a small rebellion. She had recognized the comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak of women in subservient roles, in real life and on screen, and she wanted to do something, even if it was discreet. She also aligned with the gay rights cause, shaped by her relationships with several gay cast members. Paul Lynde, who played Uncle Arthur, eventually lived his life as an open secret in Hollywood. Dick Sargent, the second Darren, did the same. Agnes Moorehead, who portrayed Endora, was rumored by some to be lesbian or bisexual. Indeed, a swirling joke of the era labeled Bewitched as the gayest cast in Hollywood. Elizabeth embraced that dynamic. In 1992, she marched as a Grand Marshal in the LA Gay Pride Parade, alongside Sargent, demonstrating a loyalty that overshadowed the comedic illusions. This was real solidarity in an era that was still bridging old homophobia. She offered personal and financial support to friends with HIV/AIDS once the crisis hit in the early 1980s. The illusions overshadow heartbreak yet again, because for many of these beloved comedic actors, AIDS arrived as a death sentence at a time when the Reagan administration offered little assistance. She took a stand, showing that comedic illusions can be complemented by genuine compassion and activism. She recognized that her star power, ironically earned through comedic illusions as Samantha, could be leveraged to help a vulnerable community. Tragically, even her compassion and activism could not shield her from a lurking lethal threat: cancer. In the mid-1990s, she was diagnosed with colon cancer. Some accounts say she experienced months of unexplained fatigue and stomach pains before doctors finally identified the culprit. Others say it was discovered abruptly during a routine check or minor emergency. However it happened, by the time of diagnosis it was advanced, leaving little time for effective interventions. She tried to maintain a stoic front, telling close friends to remain hopeful. But only 8 weeks after discovering the truth, she passed away on May 18, 1995, at age 62, at her Beverly Hills home. Her children and her final partner, actor Robert Foxworth, were by her side. The illusions overshadow heartbreak for the last time. As beloved as she was, her end arrived swiftly, preventing the public from fully grappling with how she had shaped the 1960s comedic illusions that overshadow heartbreak in show business. In the aftermath of her passing, revelations came forth about how Bewitched was more than comedic, about her rebellious stances, her father's disapproval, her cyclical pattern of marrying older men, her behind-the-scenes activism, and her final heartbreak in losing the chance to do further roles that might subvert expectations. She had admitted that the show was a metaphor for hidden identities, and that comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak for closeted individuals or women restricted by patriarchal norms. The comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak behind a comedic premise. But thanks to her subversive touches, the show quietly championed acceptance. The New York Times recognized her as quietly pushing boundaries in primetime TV, noting that Samantha, with her unstoppable magical powers, was effectively the authority figure in that household, overshadowing Darren's bumbling efforts to keep life normal. That comedic dynamic ironically aligned with second-wave feminist ideals of a woman's strength, couched in comedic illusions so as not to alarm a 1960s audience. In the final interviews, Montgomery admitted she found comedic subversion to be the only feasible route at the time. She had come from a father who insisted women stay subdued, and for years she endured a husband or two who pressed a similar control. She overcame them, forging an unbreakable spirit that saw her champion anti-war sentiments, gay rights, and the fight against sexist constraints. It was a life so layered that many fans, used to the comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak, had no idea about the tragedies that shaped her. From forced choices in her earliest marriages to paternal condemnation, from behind-the-scenes tension with Dick York and the meltdown with William Asher, from hidden activism to quiet heartbreak during the AIDS crisis, from rebellious costuming choices to serious mental strains from her unsettled love life, Elizabeth Montgomery's journey defies the simplicity of the comedic illusions that overshadow heartbreak in 1960s domestic sitcoms. And ironically, that very comedic creation, Samantha Stevens, remains a cultural icon. Even decades after Bewitched ended, the show reruns continue to gather new fans. Younger generations watch for laughs, possibly ignorant of how the illusions overshadow heartbreak for the star who once wiggled her nose so fetchingly. They see the bright pastel sets, the whimsical magic sound effects, the comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak for that era's social constraints. Only upon deeper research do they discover how the illusions overshadow heartbreak behind the laughter. And so her final revelation 3 years before her demise, that Bewitched was partly a coded statement for acceptance, be it for women's equality, gay rights, or other repressed groups, made the world reevaluate the show's legacy. Since 1995, many tributes to Elizabeth Montgomery have attempted to highlight these complexities. Documentaries point out her personal diaries, her father's sternness, and the multiple times she pivoted from comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak to far more serious roles. They also emphasize the loyalty she showed to those marginalized by mainstream society. In that sense, the comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak might ironically also overshadow the fact that Elizabeth Montgomery was a quiet moral force. She insisted that comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak did not have to equate to comedic illusions overshadow social activism. She used the popularity of Bewitched as a launching pad to address issues in press interviews once the show ended. The illusions overshadow heartbreak might remain the abiding memory for casual fans. But to those who peer deeper, a picture emerges of a woman who triumphed over paternal discouragement, insisted on forging her own path in love, albeit sometimes with self-destructive results, championed progressive causes at personal cost, and maintained comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak for as long as the industry demanded. She was indeed a multidimensional figure who overcame or at least confronted adversity repeatedly. Now, nearly half a century after Bewitched completed its run, references to Elizabeth Montgomery pop up in odd corners of pop culture. A cameo mention in The Simpsons, the use of Samantha's nose wiggle in comedic parodies, or a mention in feminist scholarship about comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak in 1960s television. She left behind 4 children, each of whom has a nuanced recollection of their mother's balancing act, star versus activist, comedic illusions, overshadow heartbreak versus personal determination. They occasionally open up in interviews describing her sense of humor, her kindness, her straightforward approach, and how, near the end, she refused to let colon cancer overshadow her spirit. She faced her final days the same way she faced paternal condemnation and marital fiascos, with quiet, steel resolve. Perhaps the best testament to her complexity is how fans continue to feel a poignant sense of what if? Did she have more breakthroughs in store? Had cancer not claimed her at 62? Might she have starred in further edgy dramas or comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak for a new generation of viewers? Might she have become a more visible political figure, leading a wave of Hollywood activism? All these possibilities highlight the abruptness of her passing, overshadowing comedic illusions with a sense that an entire chapter of her potential life story was cut short. By the time fans gleaned the deeper layers, she was gone, leaving them to piece together the puzzle from scraps of interviews, behind-the-scenes anecdotes, her father's diaries, the recollections of co-stars, and the final revelation she offered. In those revelations, she made no apologies for her rebellious streak, her progressive stances, or her sometimes destructive romantic entanglements. She accepted that illusions overshadow heartbreak is the nature of show business, especially in comedic sitcom contexts. She also expressed some regret about not parting with Bewitched earlier, recalling how the show's 8th season felt like a slog and how she might have pursued a broader range of roles. But the comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak for the sake of security, supporting children, maintaining a consistent brand, overshadowing a father's voice that might have said, "You can't do better than comedic fluff." Ultimately, she overcame that paternal echo by forging a post-Bewitched path, albeit overshadowed again by personal heartbreak in new forms. Yet she always pressed forward, whether tackling feminist stances or quietly protesting censorship. That is, in sum, the deeper tapestry of Elizabeth Montgomery's life. Illusions overshadow heartbreak. Comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak, weaving a mesmerizing pattern of defiance, heartbreak, occasional comedic hijinks, and an unwavering commitment to living on her own terms. In the decades since Elizabeth Montgomery's passing, viewers still debate the meaning of Bewitched and whether it should be remembered simply as a charming relic of the 1960s comedic suburban fantasy, or as a stealth vehicle for progressive ideas that Montgomery herself helped usher into mainstream living rooms. At first glance, the show's comedic illusions focus on a mischievous housewife casting spells to solve everyday annoyances, overshadowing heartbreak or deeper themes of identity. But upon closer inspection, one unearths the hidden complexities of an actress who, far from passively portraying a cute domestic witch, openly challenged paternal authority, endured tumultuous marriages, bridged taboo subject matters, quietly championed LGBTQ acceptance before such a stance was widely embraced, and faced down terminal cancer with unwavering resolve. The comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak, yes, but behind them lurked an unflinching moral strength that, for years, went largely unnoticed by the public. It is only now, piecing together diaries, interviews, behind-the-scenes accounts, and revelations gleaned from modern resources, that we see the fullness of her story. Heartbreak, father-fueled complexities, rebellious activism, doomed relationships, and a final bittersweet struggle against the cancer that claimed her life in 1995. Many fans grew up watching Bewitched in syndicated reruns, enthralled by Samantha's coy nose twitch, by the bizarre antics of Uncle Arthur and Aunt Clara, and by the comedic illusions overshadowing heartbreak that might have been shaping Elizabeth Montgomery's real experiences. Her father, Robert Montgomery, was no less than an Oscar-nominated luminary of Hollywood's golden age, known for refined portrayals in classics such as Night Must Fall, and for hosting a long-running TV anthology series, Robert Montgomery Presents. A scion of old New York stock and a World War II veteran, having served as a lieutenant commander in the U.S. Navy, he epitomized discipline and revered tradition. According to the accounts gleaned from some of Elizabeth's close friends, Robert disliked the idea of his daughter pursuing a career in acting. He worried about moral pitfalls, the precarious nature of stardom, and the environment of powerful men prone to exploiting young hopefuls. Yet Elizabeth, from an early age, signaled she had no intention of meekly obeying. She studied at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, forging her own identity, but in a quiet display of fatherly control, she got her small screen debut in 1951 on Robert Montgomery Presents. This cameo, which some say her father only grudgingly allowed, marked a first step. Illusions overshadow heartbreak if one thinks the star's lineage made her path easy. The father-daughter tension continued shaping Elizabeth's personal and professional decisions for years, driving her into multiple relationships with older men, each of them echoing paternal overtones she seemed both drawn to and desperate to outgrow. Her first known serious entanglement was Frederick Gallatin Kaman, a wealthy socialite from New York, older by about a decade, who offered stability and respectability. By 1954, they were married, presumably placating her father, who felt that if Elizabeth insisted on forging into show business, she might at least secure a proper spouse. Yet the illusions overshadow heartbreak here. The marriage was a mismatch from the beginning. Elizabeth refused to forego her acting ambitions and remain an elegant, well-dressed hostess in Manhattan drawing rooms. Even more scandalously, rumors surfaced that while filming her first Hollywood feature, she was drawn to the legendary Gary Cooper, already in his 50s, accomplished, undeniably older, and undeniably captivating. Cooper, for his part, had a reputation for gallant screen personas, but also for romancing leading ladies off-screen. Historians debate how deep this fling went, but the tension soared, culminating in Elizabeth divorcing Kaman in 1955, only a year after they wed. Some suspect that Robert Montgomery found the entire episode humiliating, seeing his daughter rush from an ill-conceived marriage into a rumored affair with a figure from his own generation of film stars. Elizabeth then navigated smaller roles in TV and film. She explored live theater, but also tested her range in Hollywood. By 1963, while filming the thriller Johnny Cool, directed by William Asher, she once again found herself drawn to an older man. This time, she did not merely date him. Within months, they married. William Asher, a seasoned TV producer and comedic director, immediately recognized Elizabeth's comedic gifts. The illusions overshadow heartbreak again. Behind this union was an unspoken pattern of paternal substitution. Asher, older by more than a decade, gave her professional security and a chance to develop comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak in a stable environment. Together, they pitched a show that would soon define her career, Bewitched. The concept: a witty modern witch named Samantha marries a mortal named Darren and tries to conceal her supernatural abilities from neighbors, in-laws, and the broader suburban community. Columbia Pictures, television, and ABC seized on it. Yet from day one, adversity intruded. Elizabeth discovered she was pregnant, threatening to derail production. In an attempt to salvage the show, the producers arranged creative camera angles, used large props or tables to mask her stomach, and even paused filming at times. Despite these hurdles, Bewitched premiered in the fall of 1964, quickly becoming a Nielsen powerhouse. The comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak behind the scenes, but to viewers, it was all magic. Samantha's mischievous nose wiggle, Darren's exasperation, Endora's flamboyant meddling, and an enchanting comedic premise. Off camera, the marriage between Elizabeth and Asher functioned as a creative partnership, but not always a personal idyll. They had multiple children together, and each pregnancy had to be integrated into the show's storyline or filming schedule. Gossip flew that Asher could be jealous or controlling, that Elizabeth sometimes bristled at his paternal approach. Meanwhile, Bewitched soared for 5 seasons with Dick York as Darren, until York's back pain and subsequent pill and alcohol dependency made him unreliable. Reports indicated York even confessed love for Elizabeth, perhaps in a haze of discomfort. The comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak once more. Behind the camera, tension soared, culminating in York collapsing on set during filming. Producers replaced him with Dick Sargent, starting in Season 6. Some note it was the midpoint of Season 5, but practically, Sargent assumed the role fully in Season 6, and viewers were forced to accept a new Darren. At the same time, Elizabeth juggled personal dissatisfaction. Illusions overshadow heartbreak in how she portrayed the perfect wife while her real marriage faced cracks. Rumors sprang up about an affair with a guest director, Richard Michaels. Over time, that rumor solidified. The illusions overshadow heartbreak again. A meltdown occurred when Asher discovered the affair. Both the Ashers and Michaels' own marriage collapsed in swift order, overshadowing comedic illusions about a happy set. By Season 8, Elizabeth was exhausted, confiding to colleagues that she wanted out. The illusions overshadow heartbreak. She told the producers, "I'm done." They showered her with money to keep her, but her mind was set. The show ended in 1972, leaving behind a remarkable legacy but a cast reeling from behind-the-scenes turmoil. Post-Bewitched, Elizabeth dove into projects that subverted her comedic image. In 1974's A Case of Rape, she portrayed a sexual assault survivor. The film, widely promoted, brought forth raw pathos in an era when TV seldom addressed the subject. It drew a monstrous viewership of some 30 million, confirming that illusions overshadow heartbreak or comedic roles were not her limit. She tackled the grisly role of Lizzie Borden in 1975, a step that further distanced her from the squeaky clean Samantha. Then, in 1977, she appeared in A Killing Affair, sometimes known as The End of the World or A Killing Affair, co-starring with O.J. Simpson. The film's storyline ventured into race relations, depicting an interracial romance which was still taboo in certain parts of the country. The illusions overshadow heartbreak in comedic references that by 1977, many audiences were not ready to embrace such a pairing. Decades later, the comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak because O.J. Simpson would be tried for a sensational murder, making the film appear eerily ominous in hindsight. Away from the set, Elizabeth quietly engaged in activism that belied her comedic illusions, overshadow heartbreak in the mainstream. She vocally opposed the Vietnam War, a stance that at times risked alienating conservative viewers. She championed the women's liberation movement. According to multiple sources, she consciously subverted 1960s norms on the Bewitched set by refusing to wear a bra, mirroring the bra-burning protests that symbolized female empowerment. She took further steps to inject subtle feminist narratives into Samantha's dynamic, insisting that Samantha's magical power overshadowed Darren's attempts to control her. Elizabeth found an unexpected synergy with the gay community. Half a dozen actors or crew members on Bewitched were rumored or confirmed to be gay, including Paul Lynde, Dick Sargent, and possibly Agnes Moorehead. Elizabeth stood by them in a repressive era. She and Sargent eventually co-led the 1992 Los Angeles Gay Pride Parade, a remarkable demonstration of solidarity that pointed to deeper convictions. She also allied herself with the nascent battle against HIV/AIDS in the 1980s, fundraising, offering direct support, overshadowing comedic illusions of carefree stardom. These progressive stances, especially her championing of gay rights, seldom made headlines in a media climate more attuned to celebrity scandal than moral activism. Yet inside Hollywood, many recognized her as a quiet moral force. Despite her personal advocacy, heartbreak overshadowed comedic illusions in her private life. She parted ways with Asher, parted ways with Michaels, had a series of short romances. Her father, Robert Montgomery, died in 1981, never fully reconciling with her rebelliousness, though their relationship had softened. She at last found a steadier partner in actor Robert Foxworth, with whom she spent her final years. By the early 1990s, she remained well regarded, if not in the prime of stardom. She had cameo roles, starred in the occasional TV movie, and used her star power for philanthropic efforts. Then, around late 1994 or early 1995, she discovered she had advanced colon cancer. Her close friend, the actress and comedic star Florence Henderson, revealed in interviews that Elizabeth fought valiantly, but the diagnosis was grim. In the final 8 weeks of her life, she reportedly retreated to her Beverly Hills home. Close family visited. She maintained stoic optimism, though the illusions overshadow heartbreak for the last time. On May 18, 1995, she died at just 62. The comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak even in death. Fans, used to seeing her as an ageless comedic figure, had to process that she was gone, undone by a swift disease. In the years after her demise, a swirl of revelations began to surface, some from interviews she gave in her final 3 years. She admitted that Bewitched, for her, was partly a statement about hidden identities. If you saw Samantha hiding her powers, you might empathize with closeted gay people, with rebellious women forced to conform, or with anyone stifled by normalcy. She had gently infused that subtext into comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak. She also had regrets. She had stuck with the series for 8 long seasons, partly because of financial security, overshadowing comedic illusions, with paternal overshadowing telling her to ensure stability. She had parted from the role only when her personal life collapsed under the weight of an affair and marital meltdown. Finally, she had regrets about not carrying activism further. Though proud of her anti-war stance, pro-LGBTQ stance, and championing of the Equal Rights Amendment, she believed she might have done more. The illusions overshadow heartbreak once more. Had she lived longer, she might have become a prominent voice like Jane Fonda or Marlo Thomas, bridging entertainment with outspoken activism. Instead, colon cancer ended her road abruptly. Her father's spirit hung over the entire saga, as some surmise that in his final years, Robert Montgomery might have softened, acknowledging Elizabeth's success. He died in 1981, so never saw her final activism or the concluding meltdown of her personal battles. He also never saw the posthumous tributes that recognized her as more than Samantha, a subversive presence who quietly mainstreamed progressive attitudes on primetime TV. The comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak for many of the cast members as well. The show's so-called gay cast found partial acceptance only decades later, receiving a measure of retroactive applause for forging comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak in a repressive climate. The comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak for the entire phenomenon that was Bewitched, a show that to this day resonates in reruns, DVD sales, and streaming platforms, bridging generational gaps. What remains now is the question: do we watch Bewitched purely for nostalgia, or do we interpret it as Elizabeth evidently intended, a coded representation of female empowerment and acceptance of difference, whether it be witches or gays or assertive, no-nonsense women? The illusions overshadow heartbreak in comedic form, but modern audiences, informed by fresh knowledge, can glean a deeper dimension. The presence of an intangible paternal overshadowing shapes Samantha's comedic father-daughter spats. Endora, ironically, was the parental figure in the show. Though a comedic mother, the heartbreak overshadowed by comedic illusions might be the fact that Elizabeth spent years wrestling with father issues in real life. Similarly, the comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak in each marital fiasco. Yet she pressed on, leading gay pride parades, confronting sexism, fighting for liberal causes in an era not known for welcoming political outspokenness from female celebrities. And at last, we see the illusions overshadow heartbreak in how colon cancer abruptly ended her activism, leaving fans with the memory of a magical housewife while overshadowing the reality of a potent moral warrior. It is this re-examination that leads us to a final appreciation. Comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak, can also overshadow quiet heroism, a trait so rarely associated with comedic actors of that era. Elizabeth Montgomery's earlier confessions, culminating in those last few years, force a broader reevaluation. She was not merely a comedic actress spinning illusions for mindless escapism. She was a complex, often tormented figure, subversively weaving progressive messages into mainstream entertainment and forging personal activism despite paternal condemnation and paternalistic norms. In her final statements, she seemed at peace with her legacy, acknowledging regrets while taking pride in the stealth success of her show. She revealed the comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak for viewers who realized, belatedly, that Bewitched had, ironically, a witch championing moral acceptance and equality. That moral dimension, overshadowed by comedic illusions, has in the modern era lifted the show from ephemeral comedic fluff to a culturally significant artifact. Younger fans discovering the show on streaming or encountering reruns on niche channels parse the subtext and find a role model unexpectedly embedded in suburban laughs. Thus, illusions overshadow heartbreak once again, but heartbreak yields to admiration once the illusions are undone. Her children, in scattered interviews over the years, mention how they remember her as a loving, protective mother who maintained comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak at home. She strove to keep them from the tabloids or from the knowledge of her more flamboyant or rebellious choices, like her affair with Richard Michaels or her bra protest. They also speak of her final weeks, how she calmly faced advanced colon cancer without wanting to dwell in self-pity. The illusions overshadow heartbreak for the last time in that motherly setting. The kids recognize that their mother had far deeper convictions and strengths than the public might guess from simply watching reruns. For fans, the ultimate moral is that comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak, but heartbreak can transform illusions into impetus for subversive activism. Elizabeth Montgomery embodied that dynamic fully, forging a path that remains deeply instructive in a Hollywood system that rarely fosters such unwavering authenticity. Hence, as watchers of Bewitched, we can hold two truths. It was a comedic gem that offered breezy escapism, and it was, at the same time, a Trojan horse for progressive ideals like feminist undertones or acceptance of hidden identities, thanks in large part to Elizabeth Montgomery's personal impetus. The illusions overshadow heartbreak, but heartbreak overshadow illusions, culminating in a star who knew exactly how to wink at the camera while quietly shifting the cultural landscape. And as we glean from her revelations near the end, the existence of a comedic facade rarely negates the presence of real heartbreak behind the scenes. Instead, illusions overshadow heartbreak, serve as a stage on which an actress, battered by paternal scorn and personal fiascos, fights for liberal causes, fosters tolerance, and ultimately leaves a complicated but empowering legacy. That legacy remains, inviting repeated rediscoveries by new generations who sense under Samantha's comedic nose twitch a whiff of something radical and heartbreakingly human. Her father might never have wholly endorsed her Hollywood career. Her multiple husbands might have tried limiting her. Network censors might have insisted that comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak, never letting the show become an openly radical statement. But Elizabeth Montgomery found ways to push the boundaries, leaving a mark on viewers that endures. When in the last 3 years of her life, she began admitting how Bewitched was partly an allegory for repressed identities, or how she'd staged subtle protests like skipping a bra or supporting gay co-stars. Under that comedic veneer, the world realized that Samantha's nose twitch was more than comedic cuteness. It was a discreet sign of quiet rebellion. And in that revelation, we can't help but see the heartbreak overshadowed by comedic illusions. We see a performer who struggled, overcame, nurtured star power, used it to champion progressive ideas, and ultimately parted from us too soon. That, in the final analysis, is Elizabeth Montgomery's greatest enchantment, the capacity to take comedic illusions overshadow heartbreak, turning them into subtle but potent social commentary, forging a lasting legacy of love for Bewitched, as well as admiration for the fearless woman behind the magic.